Hey folks, we're back for our weekly exclusive YouTube chat. So thanks for joining us. Great to be on the air with you again. Our last broadcast of the week. So, well, you never know what's going to happen before the week's over, but it looks like that for the moment. So if you never joined us on YouTube before, welcome. Take a second and subscribe to the channel. I think there's a little bell icon to click on to make sure that you're notified when we come on with a new video or do something live. And if you have a question, just post it, but please, so it'll stand out, start with at AskDrBrown, at AskDrBrown. That will cause your question to stand out from just your chat back and forth. Feel free to interact, differ with each other, etc., answer each other's questions. That's fine. And if you're able, please help us with a financial contribution. Stand with us to help us to touch more people. I think you see how critical our voice is at a time like this. So stand with us. There's a $ on the bottom. Click on that. Your gift of any size is appreciated. And if you have a question while you are giving, then go ahead and post the question at the same time. That'll jump to the top of the page. And one thing, because this is not live radio, it's just YouTube, I can have just sip of water here, all right? Because I've been running in between our broadcast and now. So enjoy this. This is for all of you who are thirsty. There we go. All right. We start with Cody. I'm struggling with believing. Aside from reading the Bible, what other things do you suggest to help me grow in faith and to remove doubt? Cody, first thing, don't feel condemned. Don't feel condemned in any way by this. Remember the prayer of the father of the boy who had seizures in Mark 9. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And then in Jude, we're instructed to have mercy on those who doubt. So this can happen. So yes, reading the Bible is very important, but talk to God honestly. Honestly, as God, I don't even know if you're there, or I don't know if you're listening to it, wherever you are. Or, Lord, I don't know how to believe. I believe this is your word, but I don't know how to believe it. Ask him to help you. He will do that. And then when you see an answer to prayer, when you remember something in your life that was clearly God, journal it, write it down, remind yourself, think back, what can I say that I know was God working in my life? Write those things down and let them be like a peg in the wall that you hold on to that strengthens you. And then read powerful testimony books. Read powerful testimony books. Read something like Lee Strobel's The Case for Miracles. He goes through questions of unbelief. He goes through these issues. And read testimonies of the miraculous. So Lee Strobel's book, The Case for Miracles, or Randy Clark's book, Eyewitness to Miracles, or Eric Metaxas's book, 7 Miracles, or just Charles Finney's Answers to Prayer, or George Mueller's Answers to Prayer, these old books with documenting things, and let it build your faith, and then God will take you through. Just say, God, you have to give it to me, because I cannot manufacture it on my own. Nikic, thank you for your contribution very much. Could you go over the chronology of the return from exiles, which came afterwards? Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Jerusalem rebuilt, temple rebuilt, walls rebuilt. It's a bit confusing in the text. Well, here's the reason it gets a bit more confusing, is that Ezra is not chronological. Yes, you have, in Ezra and Nehemiah, you have different Persian kings out of order. You say, what? It's like, it's to share a certain story and what happens between Ezra and Nehemiah, and some of the conflict, some of the challenges of what actually happened, and the resistance that different things are put together to share certain accounts for spiritual impact. And it's done in a way that would be known and understood, but it's not ordered, all of it chronologically. Yeah, so that again makes it that makes it more interesting. But we do have Nehemiah preceding Ezra, right? So you have the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, but Ezra does not arrive until later. So let's just sort some of this out. And I'm probably saying some of this backwards. I did this in a video the other day about Supreme Court appointees, and I said things out of order with different presidents. Okay, so Nehemiah 8. Yeah, so this is where Ezra brings the book of the law. So ignore what I had just said chronologically there. I was thinking of Ezra 8, where it goes through the genealogy of Ezra. Okay, so we'll skip that for the moment. All right, so chronology is you have first the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem and the foundations of the temple. The final rebuilding of the temple, it takes place some years after that. So, okay, just looking back at the question, the specific chronology. Tell you what we'll do. To simplify things, when we have our next YouTube chat, or if I have a moment here in the midst of things, I will post something, because the more I'm saying it, the more convoluted I'm making it, which I apologize for. I will post something that gives the best chronology that we have in terms of what happens first, who comes when, etc. There's a simple chart I want to post. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'm going to look for it as we're talking. So sorry for confusing things more. One of my less brilliant moments of exposition here. Denny, thank you for your contribution. Thanks so much for the book recommendation, Restore the Word. Does letting fear in my life create a barrier between me and God? Thank you, and God bless. Yeah, this is a really good book by Pat and Karen Schatzline on overcoming fear and how they dealt with fear, with her getting a cancer diagnosis and things, and real life issues. So yes, when I give place to fear, that does put a barrier between God and me. Not that God is not working or in my life, but I'm not as able to receive the reality of it because I'm terrified, I'm scared. So think of it like this, okay? You are trapped in a pit, and I'm trying to reach down in some well, okay? I'm reaching down with my hand, and I'm trying to grab you to pull you out, but you are so terrified. You fell in there, you were running from someone who was trying to kill you. And when you see that hand and I say, it's me, it's okay. No, it's not you. You want to hurt me. So even though I'm there just the same. I'm there to help just the same, right? But instead, you think that hand is going to hurt you, or you're too fearful to reach out. Something's going to happen, or I'm going to slip, or it's not really you. So that's what happens with fear. It gets in the way of us receiving the promises of God and the goodness of God, and blots us, puts a wall between us and peace and joy and security. But don't get fearful about fear. Go to God with your fears, and He'll help you. Brandon, thank you for your gift. Really appreciate it. Please pray for the lost. Pray for those who don't know the Lord and are hurt and disappointed. Please, they are lost. Think of Jonah 4. It is such a moment now for reaching the lost. It is such a moment for harvest. Jesus and the disciples see a man born blind in John chapter 9, and the disciples asked, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? It's certainly a logical question, right? I mean, somebody must have sinned. Maybe he sinned in the womb, or his parents sinned, because it's a bad thing. Jesus says, no, he didn't sin. His parents didn't sin. But this happened that the works of God could be manifest. In my book, When the World Stops, written in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis, but a book for well beyond the crisis, any crisis, I talk about how God sees things redemptively. So we see blindness, which is terrible disability. We see somebody must have sinned. Jesus sees this as an opportunity for God to be glorified as the healer. So when the craziness of everything happened in our society today, it is the most ripe time, I tell you from the heart, it is the most ripe time right now to reach people with the gospel that I can remember in many, many years. It absolutely is. All right, Matthew, thank you for your contribution. Do you think there is good evidence for Psalm 90 being written by Moses? By the way, your book, Go and Sin No More, has greatly helped me. Thank you, Matthew, for the good word. You know, when I went to write Go and Sin No More in the late 90s, I didn't want to write it yet because I wanted to be at an even higher level of holiness and walking in even greater obedience and dominion over the flesh. And I felt God prompting me, now you need to write the book. It's like, but Lord, I want to be at a certain place when I write it. And what I kind of felt him saying was, in this world, you'll never arrive fully at that goal. But the word is true, and you're living in obedience. So right now, based on the truth of the word, even though you have not yet fully arrived, and that's the reality in this world, we have not yet fully arrived, but we can live lives victoriously over sin by God's grace. Where we fall short, his grace is there to forgive us and to empower us to go higher. Is there good evidence that Psalm 90 was written by Moses? The biggest evidence is the superscription. It's not ascribed to David, a Psalm of David, anything like that. So 1, the superscription. 2, the content works very, very well, written towards the end of the wilderness wanderings. Is there vocabulary in there that would exclude Moses, that is clearly later vocabulary, like something that was borrowed from Greek and that would be much, much later? No, there's no evidence of that. So the vocabulary does not prevent it. And Jewish tradition has unanimously said, yes, that's the superscription. But we can't prove that he wrote it any more than we can prove that David wrote a psalm. But there is not strong evidence against it and good evidence for it. The synagogue, thank you again for your faithfulness and your contribution. I was recently asked, imagine 2 worlds, one with God, one without. Is rape wrong in both? My response was, the question is nonsense. One cannot imagine a world without God. Is this a good response? Actually, on the one hand, you're right in saying that human life is inconceivable without God. That the more you understand human life, the more you understand the makeup of the cell, the genius of DNA. I was just jotting something in a new book that should come out next, writing a book now, due out next April, something like that, called Has God Failed You? How to Renew Your Faith and Restore Your Hope. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting book. Trust me, I'm leaning on God to write it. I feel so inadequate in leaning on God to write this book to help people who've lost their faith or struggling with their faith. So due out, like less than a year from now, maybe 8 months from now, something like that, 10 months from now. So I was talking about the miracle of creation, that you can't just explain the universe without God, human life without God, and DNA, that, okay, one hair is 50 microns. All the DNA in us is 6 microns. If you physically stretched out the code, right, or the DNA string, if you physically stretch it out because it's coiled, it would be about 6 feet long, right? About 6 feet long. But if I read 1 letter a second of the DNA coding, it's actual intelligent coding. If I read 1 letter a second, it would take 96 years to read it. Some figures like that. It's like, oh. So on the one hand, you're absolutely right. On the other hand, I'm happy to go there theoretically, because the point is that if there is no God, there is no ultimate morality. We are just products of random evolutionary processes, and we cannot appeal to ultimate right or wrong. Survival of the fittest. So if is it morally wrong when a lion kills and eats a zebra? No, it's not, because there's no murder. Animals can't murder. Only human beings can murder, because we're created in the image of God, and human beings are different and make moral choices. When a spider catches a fly in a net and eats it, that's not morally evil, because that's just nature. But when human beings do things, there's right and wrong, evil, because of God. You take God out of the picture, why is rape wrong? If a stronger person wants to abuse someone else, that's their prerogative. I mean, there is no such concept as right and wrong, ultimately. So that's where that answer would go. Noe, thank you for your contribution. I've seen many Christians online very upset about the DACA decision. Way different story than LGBT decision. What's your take on this? Okay, so the LGBT decision, of course, absolutely disastrous, and absolute. We're 100% right to absolutely criticize Justices Roberts and Gorsuch, who should have known better and ruled better. And attorneys involved have told me no one saw this coming. It was an open shut case. We know what sex meant. In Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you couldn't discriminate on the basis of 5 things, sex being the last one. Everyone knew what it meant, male or female. You can't say, well, no, unless it's a men's club or a women's club where it's exclusively male or female. In other words, if I'm just hiring something generically, I can't, no, I don't like women, or I don't like men. That's all it ever meant. The idea to bring in sexual orientation, no one was thinking that. The idea that you now bring in gender identity or transgender dressing, no one was thinking that. It was a complete outrageous ruling. It is now writing something into the law that was never there. So there is good reason for uproar, and it's a catastrophic ruling. It's going to have massive negative implications and put people through a lot of hardship. The DACA decision, many have been equally critical of Justice Roberts. This, you could say, is more debatable because it was giving legal status to the children of illegal immigrants. The argument would be that that was basically an executive order from President Obama, an order that he did not have the right to make, to put it in broad terms, and therefore was illegal. And the court should therefore overturn it. You can make a very strong argument that the court should have overturned it. Now, it's a whole separate question about what the status of the children of immigrants should be, and of illegal immigrants. Their parents came here illegally. You don't want to encourage that. You don't want to suddenly have an open way that you're automatically in. You come here illegally, have your kid. Well, now the kid's here. They become a citizen automatically or whatever. So there should be some kind of path, something that has to be done. And obviously the illegal immigrants, there must be a penalty and then a path for them to go. Otherwise, they shouldn't be here. So you want to have compassion on everyone. And you want to recognize someone grew up here. This has been their home for 20 years or 15 years. Okay, you understand that they feel as American as anybody else. But there has to be a right way to do things. Sean, why do the people say peace and safety in 1 Thessalonians 5 right before the return of the Lord if it's during the tribulation period? How is there peace and safety during that time? Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because he says then sudden destruction is going to come. So the answer would be that there will obviously be some lulling to sleep. There will be some outward signs that everything's okay. It could even be then that there's a Middle East peace treaty, that as per Ezekiel 38 and 39, Israel is dwelling in unwalled cities, which you would take to mean that the barriers are down and its neighbors and friends, and there's going to be some false peace before the destruction lets loose, before chaos comes, before the world goes crazy, and before wrath is poured out. That's what I believe Paul's saying there in 1 Thessalonians 5. Alberto, thank you for your contribution. What would be your advice for a brother that is fearful of the whole COVID-19 situation and of death? Alberto, if you're able, I'd encourage you to purchase my book, When the World Stops, for that individual. When the World Stops, Words of Hope, Faith, and Wisdom in the Midst of Crisis. Chapter 1 is Fear Not. Chapter 2 is Feed Your Faith, Not Your Fears. The book ends with an exposition of Psalm 91 in Hebrew. So I would strongly say that getting words of truth and faith into our hearts is the key antidote. That we know that in the midst of the storm, God is with us. I mean, I close my eyes as I say it to feel the weight of it. God is with us. In the boat that looks like it's going to capsize and we're all going to die and Jesus is asleep and doesn't care. No, he's with you in the storm and he'll speak peace to the storm. So whether we live or we die, we belong to the Lord. I would first make sure that this person really knows the Lord, is truly born again, knows that their sins are forgiven, because with that, really, there is a lot of the breaking of the fear of death. So that is one major part of it. Then the other thing, getting words of faith and truth into our hearts. So if you're able, get the book When the World Stops. You get the ebook or the physical book. I think that will really help minister faith and security. David, can you expound on what Paul meant in 1 Corinthians 11 about head coverings? It seems Paul was just giving instruction to them versus biblical commands for all time. Yeah, there are a couple of things going on. There's long hair and there's head coverings. And they worked in conjunction in terms of a woman's dignity and honor. And in the Corinthian world, as in other parts of the ancient world, Middle East, and even in some parts of the world today, women would be covered either with a veil or a head covering, but not just the little doily, something that actually preserves certain modesty. The long hair was important as well as part of a woman's glory. And if you were a married woman, you would not go out in public without your face being covered. This was simply the custom. So the question is, when you have a house meeting, what about that? You're in the privacy of your own home. Should the woman, meaning the wife, wear a head covering? The answer is yes. And there's an honoring of authority, so recognizing the role of the husband, and then the husband being under the Lord, and then everything being in proper order. And then he says, because of the angels, what does that mean? Does it mean everything's in proper order because the angels are present? Or the one idea that the angels are going to lust after the women if their heads are not covered, that's, put that one on the side a bit. But I mean, some have suggested that. But when Paul says, doesn't nature itself teach you this, that it's a shame for a woman to have short hair, and it's a shame for a man to have long hair, he is dealing with common culture and custom. Now, I know there are societies where women will have their heads almost shaved and things like that. And I don't believe Paul is telling us that if that's the case with someone today, that they are in sin. But generally speaking, a woman's hair is her glory more than a man's. So male pattern baldness is not the norm for a woman. For a woman to have severe baldness or hair loss is much more traumatic than for a man. And in general culture, a woman's hair will be longer and thicker naturally, and men will keep their hair shorter. That is general culture and the norm. Now, we know an Nazarite in Israel would grow his hair long, and Samson had his hair long, so it's not a sin for a man to have long hair or a sin for a woman to have short hair. But this general culture, general norms that Paul is appealing to, and specifically the head coverings, that has to do with a married woman at a meeting at home. That's the best way to understand that. King. Regarding divorce remarriage, I've seen different opinions on how the word divorce is mistranslated. It actually means to separate. Is remarriage okay? Will someone go to hell if they did? Divorce is divorce. Hebrew can refer to it as sending away, but it means divorce. And divorce and remarriage are very serious subjects in the Bible. And if you were married, you were a believer, you're married to a believer, God forbid you take an interest in someone you're not married to and decided to leave your wife and go live with that person. Then you divorced your wife, say we're incompatible, and you married the woman you've committed adultery with. You are in sin. You are in adultery. The divorce and the remarriage is invalid in God's sight. It is based on sin, and you are now committing adultery. You say, well, what if I repent? Well, then repentance would mean leaving that relationship, and if your wife will have you back, taking you back. That was what repentance would look like. You say, well, that was 10 years ago. I fell away from the Lord. I was backslidden. I've gotten right with God. My wife is remarried and moved on. What do I do? Well, that is then between you and God. God will forgive you through the blood of Jesus for your sins. Now the question is, okay, God, I got married in sin. What do we do? I would say you take that to the Lord. And if you're allowed to make a fresh new start in God, then you do so together. If you have to sort that out scripturally and sit down with pastoral leadership and get his mind. But you may be the victim of divorce. You were the woman in this situation that I just described, the first wife, and you have, as I understand it, biblical grounds to remarry. Go to my website, AskDrBrown.org, type in divorce, remarriage. You'll get a little bit more insight there. And then just make sure you know forgiveness comes through the cross, but you do not want to then walk in willful disobedience. You need to examine your situation with pastoral leadership. Juan, thank you for your contribution. Just wondering how archaeology and Near Eastern studies view the flood. Do the scriptures allow for a regional flood? It's possible. I don't read it. I don't read it like that. I have seen strong arguments for regional floods all over the world, and that's why we have similar flood traditions. I have seen strong arguments geologically and in other ways archaeologically arguing for a universal flood. The most natural way to read Genesis 6, 7, and 8 is that it is a universal flood. And there are fine scholars and geologists and archaeologists who will support that and say there's evidence to support that. And that's why we have flood traditions from around the whole world at similar times in history. Others will dispute it and say it must be regional, but the most natural reading of the text would be universal. It's not impossible that it's regional, but it's not the most natural reading of the text. A good mission. If I strongly desire healing from lifelong physical infirmity, how often should I seek healing verses without a performance mentality or even concern that I'm trying to use God? Well, first, there are many beautiful promises that the Lord's given to us about being a healer, being a deliverer, and this reflects on his nature. So there's certainly nothing wrong whatsoever from asking him for healing. You can say, Lord, I praise you for your goodness. If I'm in this same physical body which is never healed the rest of my life, I'm going to worship you and glorify you. And I'm going to thank you that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. But in the midst of that, I'm going to continue to ask for a miracle because the Bible gives us strong reason to. And as God is revealed as our healer. And Jesus performs miracles not only to verify that he is the Messiah, not only to stamp his mission with divine authority, but also to demonstrate the compassion and goodness of God and to reveal God's will to us. That's why the miracles continue into the New Testament and beyond. So I would read things that build my faith and encourage me and be edified by that, but I'd have a spirit of thankfulness in the midst of it. Lord, I'm going to worship you, serve you, no matter what, and I know that healing comes by your grace, not by my performance. And then as you feel burdened, just press in. Sometimes great miracles take place after great agony of heart and real perseverance and intense trial. And that's when the breakthroughs will come. But it's not up to your performance. We're relying on God's goodness. And again, have an attitude of thanksgiving and worship. That will work against the spirit of performance. I got to do better. I got to work harder for God to answer my prayers. Isaiah, do you know any resources that discuss other Jewish preachers during Jesus' earthly ministry, their names, life, and teachings? No. We don't have other well-known Jewish preachers at that time. Now, there are some voices here and there, but outside of the New Testament, the rabbinic literature is primarily looking at teachers of the traditions, and then most of what rabbinic literature mentions is well after the time of Jesus. So in terms of well-known contemporary Jewish preachers first century, no, the New Testament record gives us the main ones. Bernard, thank you for your generosity. Really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for giving and praying. Your recent video on misconceptions about witnessing to Jews in Israel was interesting. How should Christians think about individual Jewish people and their eternal condition? They should think about individual Jewish people as part of the human race and therefore lost without God's grace. They should look at individual Jewish people as different members of the human race. So the majority of Jews on the planet today are not religious Jews. They're not Sabbath observant. They're not studying Torah daily. They're not getting up dawn and putting on tefillin and praying the men. They're They're not abiding strictly by the dietary laws. That's the large majority of Jews worldwide. In America, even a higher percentage than in Israel. And then you have the moderately religious and then the very, very religious. So there's a wide range of Jews. But Jews sin like everyone else. Jews fall short like everyone else. Jews need mercy like everyone else. And if Jews can be saved without Jesus, then there's no sense to his mission because he came first for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. If Jews can be saved without Jesus, it makes no sense that Paul said the gospel is to the Jew first, right? So absolutely, Jewish people need Yeshua like everyone else, but often you need to be more nuanced in sharing your faith because of Jewish historical experience or Jewish objections to Jesus, which of course we've dealt with in 5 books answering Jewish objections to Jesus in a 22-hour DVD series that you can get, which is called Countering the Counter Missionaries, or How to Answer the Rabbis on our website. Hey, I'm just going to check something and give you a quick reminder here. Let's see. Patreon, where are we at? 217. Okay. Would you consider becoming a Patreon partner? What does it mean? $10 or more per month. So that's your contribution. For some, hey, no problem. For others, a challenge. But see if you feel you can do it. $10 or more per month. And what you get is 2 bonus videos a week. Not a month. A week. So I'm just finishing up a little series on names of God. We just did a long series before that on Proverbs, before that Hebrews. And you get these for free. And then, so that's 1 video a week, bonus teaching. They can be 15 minutes, they can be 30 minutes. Then this YouTube chat you get. You say, well, no, everyone gets this. No, live, everyone can watch it now. But the moment we're done, it gets privately archived. But as a Patreon supporter, you get to watch this content. And, oh, something even better. You get treasure in heaven because you're sowing into souls. You're sowing into us making an impact. So join in today. Let's grow that number. Patreon.com/AskDrBrown. Patreon.com/AskDrBrown. Sign up today. And when you do, because we've been doing this for months now, there are over 100 videos you start with. Yeah, so we have weeks and weeks and weeks of enjoyable video material just when you get started, and then 2 new videos every week. Would you do that? Would you partner with us today? And it's kind of like holding our hands up. But the better thing than even all of this is that through your giving, we can produce more high-quality content. You know how overflowing I am and my team is with vision, with goals. We want to put this out. We want to do this. We want to add this. We want to all this additional stuff we want to do. With your funding, it becomes a reality. So patreon.com. Yeah, Kai's just scrolling through some of the lessons there. Bonus Show 56, YouTube chat, just on and on. So join us, patreon.com/AskDrBrown. All right. Wakinsai. Sir, what is your view on the monarchy of the Father or the Eastern Orthodox view of the Trinity? I don't want to disappoint you, but I have not studied that in great depth. If my friend James White was here, he'd give you a detailed, theological, precise answer. I've not studied it in sufficient depth to give you an intelligent answer. But as I have time, let me look at that more and then respond with my perspective. So sorry, I can't answer that better. Shlomo. Dr. Brown, would you share a short advice on how to raise children, specifically daughters, your experience in Beth's books, authors? Thank you. Okay. I'm no expert, but I am a father and grandfather. So in other words, I haven't written books on how to raise a perfect family or this or that or do seminars, but hey, I love the Lord. Nancy and I love the Lord and did our best to raise our daughters. And they're fine women today with great families. They are devoted wives, devoted mothers, and doing a great job. But the first thing is spend quality time with the kids. Let them know that they matter. That's the biggest thing. Let them know that they matter. It's not, yeah, I'll be right there. Or as you're with them, Daddy, why are you texting? Oh, let it be that you focus on them. Quality time is really important. The kids will know pretty well if you want to be there or not. All right? That's one thing. Second thing, for daughters especially, let them know how special and beautiful they are. Don't let them need to hear it from some man out there, from some guy that's going to start flattering them because he just wants to get them in bed. Let them know that. Find ways to compliment them. And for me, it's easy. But to commend them, find ways to do that, to make them feel good about themselves, especially as they get a little older and the hormones start to change. You can be so insecure and say, my friends are pretty, or I'm this and I'm that. Now, obviously, you can't remove that from them entirely, but live in such a way that you're really a hero to them, that they really look up to you. Treat your wife and interact with her in a way that sets a good example, that is godly and kind and praising and affectionate, and then live in such a way where you're self-controlled, where you're not going crazy and losing your temper, and that they look up to you. And the more they look up to you, the more your words matter to them, the more your words carry weight with them. You don't just want to speak empty words, but your words carry weight. And a book that I read that I found really helpful as a young dad was called The Effective Father by Gordon MacDonald. So let me recommend that to you. I'm sure there are other great parenting books and things like that. The Effective Father. Check that out. I believe it's still in print after these many years. Well, one last thing. You know the famous books on the 5 love languages. So you find out what your spouse's love language is. You know, it's affection, or it's, gifts, or it's praise, or whatever. And when you realize that that's what ministers to your spouse, then you're careful to do that. So is Gary Coleman, the author, they have a children's edition. Check that out. 5 love languages for your children. I don't know the exact name, but I think that would basically be it. Faithful to God. What are your thoughts on the intellectual dishonesty of rabbinic counter-missionaries such as Tovia Singer? Also, could you expound upon his insistence on avoiding a debate with you? Most of the counter-missionaries I've dealt with over the years are not like Tovia Singer. The ones that I've dealt with for many years on a regular basis have integrity and will not willfully misrepresent or are not diabolical in those regards. Oh, I believe they are working against God and doing work that is destructive. They would see me doing the same in preaching Jesus to Jewish people. But there are some counter-missionaries I've dealt with over the years that are unethical. There are some real bad apples in Israel that will really try to stir up trouble and dissension. But very sadly, Tovia Singer, who's become prominent through internet and just focused on this for many years, is deceptive and will use arguments that he knows have been refuted, but will still use them. And then either he's lying through his teeth or he's completely forgotten what happened in our history and our relationship in terms of him refusing to debate me. So I'm actually going to put up a link for you where you can watch where I explain what really happened and set the record straight in terms of debating. So I'm going to do that. It's just going to take me a second to grab that. But again, because it's not live radio, a little bit more flexibility and kind of chilling as we do this. So let's just see. Singer. And then I got some really good news for you. Here we go. Yep. This is it. And let me grab this link, which is here. And I am going to, hang on. Do I have to scroll down? Where do I do that? Okay, say something. I'm going to say something. Boom. Okay, I just posted the link that will set the record straight there with Tovia's false claims. Now, some really good news. We received some funding that's going to help us put out a series of videos, God willing, that specifically will demolish the error in Toby Singer's videos. Again, he's really focused on internet and has reached a number of people there and really sowed confusion. So we're gonna grab the video. We're gonna pull out the key lie, the key error, the key deception, the key distortion, the key misconception, and then we'll rebut it. And the videos will maybe be 10 or 15 minutes long. So if he's got an hour video, we'll pull out the salient point, play a little clip, fair usage from the video, and then boom, demolish it. And God willing, within the next few months, we're going to start recording those and little by little putting those out. So by God's grace, we're believing that truth will dispel lies and light will dispel darkness. But again, I don't think that all counter-missionaries are like Toby Singer. In fairness to other counter-missionary rabbis, don't think they're all like him. Dave, thank you for your contribution. If I'm seeking mentors, one for overall and one for my area of ministry, how much of this should come from church leadership who seem too busy versus more personal mentor, especially to help me with my ministry? I went through much of my believing life thinking it'd be great to be mentored in this area, that area, and I never got it. Now, I learned a lot from different pastors over the years and learned from them and learned from being with them, but I never had a mentor. And then by the time God connected me with Leonard Ravenhill, when I was 34 and he was 82, in 1989, he asked if I would be his friend. Of course, I looked up to him and revered him in the Lord. But even there, that was not a mentoring situation, that I was formed a certain way in the Lord. So I've never really had that. I've learned much, learned from David Wilkerson, preaching for many times, but sitting, listening to him. And James Robinson, a dear friend now, older brother than me, dear friend, international leader as well. And whenever he calls, wants to share something with me, speak into my life, I drink it in, but it's not a mentor relationship. But they're very important. And I love, when we have groups of students and things, to be in small mentoring groups. And I can't be a full mentor in their lives in the fullest sense of the word, but I would really pray for a divine connection and relationship. And if you are in ministry, if you can find someone of like heart that you can connect with, that would be happy to talk with you regularly or speak into your life, which I seek to do for some key people on a regular basis to this day. Otherwise, I would approach one of the pastor leaders that you most relate to and just say, hey, I'm really looking for a mentoring relationship in my life, which to me would mean X, Y, Z. Could you pray about that and see if the Lord would put that on your heart? If not, is there someone else, an older brother, that you could recommend within the body here or in a local ministry? And that's great if you can serve under them, grow in that respect. That's great. If not, keep relying on the Lord and read everything you can from leaders who have been successful in ways that are important to you. Do your best to glean from them. Yahweh, does Christ Mashiach, so speaking of Jesus, have Yahweh's DNA? Well, does Yahweh have DNA? He created it in us, but does he have DNA? Would you say the equivalent of DNA in a divine setting? Does Yeshua have that? Yes, of course. Along with fully human DNA, he would have the divine equivalent because he's fully God and fully man. Jake, what advice would you have for someone who, with scrupulosity, who always feels condemned? All right, I want to encourage that person to hang on. I gotta sign in here. 1 second. I just got locked out of my account. Okay, that's not it. 1 second. Does that get me in? Oh, come on. All right. Get online. Go to Amazon. And look for Ryan Bruss, Bruss. Check out his new book on Living Loved. It's written just for people like you. It's beautiful. It's life-giving. It's encouraging. Living Loved. I believe that's the name of it. Brand new by my son-in-law, Ryan Bruss. Drink it in. The love of God, the affirmation of the Father. There we go. Living Loved, awakening your heart to the Father's love. That's it. Read that. Be encouraged. When you recognize God's love for you through Jesus, it is so freeing. And God's desire for you and God's affection towards you. Out of that, you can get freed from I didn't pray enough. I didn't work. I wasn't perfect in my love for my neighbor. I read the Bible, but I wasn't focused. I know I said I would pray, but I was distracted. And hey, that's commendable to have that tremendous desire to be accurate and obedient in every way, but it could really be terribly draining, condemning. All right, couple more questions. Daniel, I've been recently plagued by the devil with doubts about everyone and everything. Is there any way of discerning a real miracle from a false one? Sure. First, a real miracle is real. In other words, you had this terrible condition on your hand and for 6 months and nothing the doctors prescribed would work. And someone said, hey, can I just pray for you? I feel God's going to heal your hand. You pray, but instantly disappears and never comes back. That's a real miracle. Can't deny that. And if it brings glory to God, the God of the Bible, then it's a genuine miracle. If Jesus is glorified through it and it's supernatural in its content, that's a genuine miracle. I recommended this earlier on the air, but read a book like Lee Strobel's The Case for Miracles, where he goes through the doubts, the questions, why isn't this one healed that? But read it, The Case for Miracles. Let your heart be encouraged. Or Randy Clark's Eyewitness to Miracles. Let your heart be encouraged. All right, maybe one more question. I've been thinking a lot about the call to suffer for Christ, and it scares me. I want to suffer for Christ, but do not want fear to paralyze me. How do I desire to suffer for Christ? Don't try. Focus on loving him. Focus on loving him. Focus on loving him, being with him, walking with him, honoring him, enjoying him. Focus on that. As you focus on that, it'll just be natural to hard times come. You'll be faithful. Focus on loving him and receiving his love. Don't focus on suffering for him. That will take care of itself. All right, we'll make this last. Thank you for your gift. Very much appreciated. ER. Dr. Brown, thank you again for all your work. Appreciate it. Oh, so not a question, just a thank you. Well, you're very welcome, and thank you so much. All right, friends, we're going to sign out. It's been great being with you again. Thanks for your attention, your interest, your questions, your prayers, your encouragement, your generosity. Let me say again, we're living in extraordinary times. I believe these are the most ripe times for the gospel that I've seen in decades. Let's seize the moment and see Jesus glorified. God bless you.